All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Serena Willis here with me on the show. Serena is an intuitive who is passionate about sharing her twin flame journey to assist shifting the collective in a paradigm of twin flame dynamics, all things divine union. Hello, Serena. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. When I first considered booking you now, I was hesitant because I have just come out of a 5 year most impactful relationship of my life in the last month. And even today, I'm just a vulnerable share up front to you guys listening. Even today, I was like, do I really want to go and talk about relationships right now? It's like been one of the hardest months of my life. We were so enmeshed, and the closest thing to marriage I've ever experienced, and so yeah, and here I am. I shared that with you, Serena, at the top of the, before we started recording. And you're like, yeah, that's what you do. You get vulnerable and share. And so I'm trying to be brave here and talk about divine unions and twin flames and all these things. And before we go fully into it, I do want to start with my cliche opening question. And that question is this: you're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Mm, that is amazing. I would say I am super passionate about just exploring everything conscious relationships. Doesn't necessarily have to be twin flames. It could be soulmates. It can be anything kind of divine in nature. Like if your relationship gets you closer to God, spirit, source, the universe, like that is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the meat of awakening through relationships. And that has been like my passion and my focus for the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any way to grow that there's no container that I know of that stimulates growth more than, you know, romantic relationship in my
Yes.
experience, and I think you'd probably agree. So it can be it's such a, yeah, cauldron of transformation. And my relationship that have just exited, it was like by far the most growth I've ever experienced in a relationship. So
Mm,
the good thing I can look at and see is like each one has gotten more close to the mark, and led to more growth within me. And I think at the end of the day, that is what our souls crave the most. We come together as an opportunity for growth. when that
mm,
when that has been fully realized, that contract has been fully realized, I believe a natural separation occurs. But because all our soul cares about is growth, it's not attached.
yes.
Whereas our human gets used to the habits and that face and that what you do together, and then but now you've grown as much as you can together, and you need to grow separately, and you're trying to like resist that. And that's where I think the static comes in, because we've got these ideas in our culture. It has to last forever in order to be successful, and I don't believe that is true whatsoever. I'm curious what you think about that.
100% Brandon. I feel like even through like, and this is something I talk to a lot of people about because primarily I work with twin flames and people that are on a twin flame journey. Okay. So even in a twin flame relationship, we're realizing this truth is that it can serve your soul's growth for a minute, for 3 years, for a lifetime. It just depends on what you specifically decide in this lifetime. And I think people
Yeah.
like you, Brandon, who have a spiritual bend and a spiritual background and have been on a spiritual journey for a long time, who are intuitive, who are tuned in, tapped in, turned on, that whole kind of a thing, you're going to cycle through relationships quicker than the average person probably because you're awake and aware and because you're focused on that growth because you're lined up with your soul in that way, right? There are people who are not lined up with their soul and they may stay with somebody for their entire life, but they go dead inside. Right. And they stop living and they're not turned on anymore. They're just like kind of sacrificing. And that's not to say it can't happen, but that's to say for you specifically, you will find so much, juice and so much life in growing with your partner. you know? And what we had kind of talked a little bit about too prior to coming on here was this idea that, you know, you don't have to be with somebody forever in order for it to be a success, right? And you were really opening yourself up in your previous relationship to bring somebody into your space, into your world. And that's a very vulnerable thing to do in a relationship, to build your empire and then to share your empire. That is huge, because I know, especially for someone like you who's passionate about everything that you do. Everything you do is very personal to you, right? So when you're able to open up and share that with somebody else, that is such a beautiful kind of love, that you can give to somebody else, is to say, "Here, I love you so much. Take a piece of everything that's mine and I want to share that with you."
Yeah. Yeah. I thank you for saying that. That's definitely was sort of the experience, I sort of brought her into my world, and even like, I run this co-living and event space in Los Angeles and Mystic Manor, and she, kind of allowed her to step into leadership of like, hey, why don't you put on the events? It got to, my joke was, people would always ask me about stuff, and I'd be like, oh, she's the boss, I just work here, like, and granted, behind the scenes, I'm making, the big decisions ultimately, but it really allowed her to blossom into, now it's like full, she's on such a spiritual path, and like, stepping into her own personal brand, and all those things, and it definitely came out of the portal of our relationship. Absolutely. So for that, I feel honored, and like you said, it's interesting because even though I know it's happening for me, not to me, and there's other opportunities for growth elsewhere for both of us, which is why it's happening. It it doesn't.
Mm,
I think it's important not to bypass the pain of it, or the hurt, and I've definitely experienced more of that than I ever have. I'm usually so resilient, and it's been like a very, yeah, it's been one of the most challenging months of my life, honestly. Processing and
yeah.
disentangling, and so I think that's an important thing, is like, you know, we are still human, and we still do have, all those, yeah, you're meant to feel it all.
Yes, 100%. And then you don't always have to look for the silver lining, that can help. But like you said, it's okay to say, I'm not okay right now. And that's a completely, as you said, that's important part of being human, because we can get really into like, okay, how do I get out of this? It's not okay for me to feel this way. I got to keep it high vibe. I got to keep it this way. And you don't. Like, part of truly honoring yourself and honoring your path is honoring it in the darkness and honoring it in the grief and honoring it in the this sucks, and that's
Yep.
100% spiritual also.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's not all about like, it's not supposed to be all rainbows and butterflies, and it certainly hasn't been for me lately. And I try and look at it as fertilizer. It's really forcing me to go deeper with my own spiritual practice. It's like,
Mhm.
go within, go within, go within. Get more in touch with my own autonomy, my own energy, my self love, my all those things. So that, I believe, is divinely designed. Because one of the things in relationship, I think it can be easy to become a little complacent, and then you
Yes.
get enmeshed, and yeah, so it definitely puts like a spark under, you know speaking of twin flames, solo flames under my butt. um and yeah, I think that's a good thing. And not to go too much into me and my personal situation, if you would, I'm very curious and open about all the different types of you hear a lot about twin flame, and you hear a lot about karmic relationship and soulmates, and I have a close friend who always refers to him as divine union. So I'd love to just hear your take on, well, two things. Two things. I'm getting a little ahead. I'd love to hear anything that you feel is relevant to share about your backstory that got you here, and then your take on kind of like what the types of relationships are.
I love that. Yeah, so my backstory is quite interesting. I am coming to you now from South Africa. As most of you can probably hear listening to this, I don't sound South African. I'm from Chicago originally. And so I always say, like, I live in the most beautiful place in the world, but I would have never chosen to come here. This has been everything I've been dreaming since I was a little girl. On a little piece of paper, one of like my high school boyfriends gave me. It was like a little wooden box, and you're supposed to write your dream for your life in there. And I wrote, I want to live somewhere near a beach and I want to do something that's making me happy. And that was it. Super simple. That's exactly where I'm at right now in my life. And it's amazing. But I had to get out of my own way in order to get here because I would have never been like, oh, I'm going to go to South Africa. It was not even on my radar.
Yeah.
So in terms of meeting my twin flame, so I talk a lot about twin flames, and that's only because it's my personal experience, right? So I've gone through these three different types of relationships in my life. First, starting out with a soulmate relationship, these relationships for me felt kind of warm and fuzzy, not a whole lot of catalyst for spiritual growth, but it's like your best friend, it's like your brother or your sister, and it can be platonic or it can be romantic. So I had that relationship, and then I got really sick and I started to ask myself, what's going on with my life? And I got so sick to the point where I was like, I'm sitting down in a chair today and I'm going to figure out what this is. And so I sat down, I realized exactly as we said in the beginning, I wasn't growing. I had become super stagnant in my life, in my career, in this relationship. I felt stuck in this relationship because it was tied to a coworker and my boss. And I was like, well, if I break up with this person, my boss is going to fire me, or, all of these things that we come up with in our heads. And
Mhm.
so then the universe, by, making me sick, kind of kicked me out of that relationship. And then I realized, like, oh, what I really want is someone spiritual. And so then enter my karmic relationship. So I have a karmic relationship, um, which was a beautiful relationship in its own right. And I think a lot of times karmic relationships, get a bad rap because they can be so painful and so triggering that a lot of people are like, oh, you're in a karmic relationship and it's like a bad thing. But really, these are a lot of times the relationships where we learn and grow the most. And we are challenged, we are stretched to our limit, and we are just, continuing on in this journey with just the hopes that we're going to make it out alive. So for me specifically, my karmic relationship was very empath, narcissistic dynamic. And so I really had to learn in my, soft empathic self how I'm going to grow, how I'm going to set boundaries, how I'm going to continue on and make it through this relationship. And so as I became stronger and stronger and stronger, what I realized was that I don't have to compromise parts of myself in order to be loved. And that for me was a major aha moment. And then enter my twin flame relationship. So, twin flame relationship, few different like major markers or signs or synchronicities that you're going to have with a twin flame relationship. A lot of times they're going to be like these big aha moments. So for my twin, it was that. It was like, oh my gosh, I can be loved exactly as I am. I don't have to be the most expanded version of myself all the time. I can be the most expanded and the least expanded, and I can be both. And I can really like have a huge dimension of myself within these relationships. And so with a twin flame, there's obviously, of course, like incredible recognition. A lot of people will consider it like, instant recognition, or a lot of people will consider, like this magnetized feeling. Like you just feel, this person and there's more to this person. And that's because you're seeing yourself in a way, you're seeing that other half of your soul, which is, kind of the idea of a twin flame is that it's two souls or it's one soul, two bodies. And so you come into this physical reality to do work on behalf of the collective. And you go through this entire awakening journey with them. And so now part of that is you go into this period of separation. And this period of separation marks, a dark night of the soul. It marks, you meet this person, there's too much triggering that happens. So then they have to separate. And then when you've done the work, you can come back together without being triggered or without, major disruptions to the relationship. So that is exactly what happened for
Mhm.
me. And as a normal, like, slightly woo woo, but as a normal, pretty sane person, the idea of a twin flame
Hmm.
relationship to me was like very out there, very fantasy, very crazy, and I was like, I cannot be the only person experiencing this. And that was the evolution of my YouTube channel, was being like, I need to get out there. I need to be talking about what's going on. There's way too many people staying in unhealthy relationships for the label of twin flame or divine unions, or, like just thinking that this person's my soulmate. So that means I'm going to tolerate not good behavior or abuse or
Yeah.
neglect, right? I'm going to tolerate this for the sake of the fact that this is my person, this is that. And so it was really important to me because I fell into that same trap with my karmic relationship, thinking that this person is the end all be all. In order to get where I want to go in my life, I need to be with this person. And when I realized that that's not true, I had a whole illusion that was shattered, and I had to come to terms with myself in that aspect. And so people that are on a twin flame journey are going to experience a lot of these kinds of things, right? These disillusionments, these feeling like, like it's really hard to look at yourself and look at the truths. And then also just feeling like you really want to be with this person and having to step away from that. And as you mentioned earlier, like really digging into the self love. The self love is like the number one most important thing, right? Because if you're not whole and complete with yourself, the only thing you're going to attract is more incompleteness, right? And you're going to attract somebody that you constantly have to fill their void, and they're constantly filling your void. And their voids, they're not fillable, right? Unless you fill them from within. So this is the thing with
Right.
all of these relationships, and kind of my story now, is so now I am 3 years into my twin flame relationship. We have a darling little baby girl, who many twin flames will call, a diamond or crystal child. She's very
Hmm.
adorable, very special. But of course, every parent will say so. So that's not unique.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so that's how we got to where we're at. And those are kind of, the markers of those relationships, of the different relationships you'll have in your life. And, this is a big question, is does everybody have a twin flame? And to me, my answer would be no, because everyone
Hmm.
has maybe a twin flame, but is everybody going to have that in this lifetime? Maybe not, right? Some people's journey it is to awaken
Yeah.
through relationships. Some people's journey it is to awaken through near death experiences or through their children or through their career, right? So we have to leave space for the fact that if you have a desire for a divine pairing or a divine union, then it's likely in your path, right? But not everybody has that
Yeah.
desire. And I think that's really important to point out.
Right. Hmm. Yeah. 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 It's such an interesting topic because I certainly don't claim to have full um, transparency or vision under the hood, if you will, of how this is all divinely orchestrated. Certainly, um, I think karmic relationships make I am 100% on board that there's karmic relationships. Like, I shared a little bit of with you prior to this, and I'll just share for the audience as like a great example of in my own life. It's like it's obviously divinely designed. You guys who've been listening for a while have all heard my birthday synchronicity, born on July 28th, and it's my dad's birthday as well. And grandmother and great grandmother died on that day. And ex business partners. I write about in my book, my hero's journey tale, how he's the villain and now redeemed and good friend again. His baby mama and grandmother, July 28th, and I met a a partner. Definitely feels like a soulmate, karmic relationship, whatever you want to call it, on July 28th, 2012, and her boyfriend before me's name was Anson, and all my relatives are from Anson, North Carolina, with that birthday that I just shared. The grandmothers and great grandmother and dad, and her Anson committed suicide on July 28th, her boyfriend before me. And then the day I met her, July 28th, 2012, she was with her good girlfriend, Michelle. And Michelle had two other good girlfriends. Gabrielle was the first one, and then Anna and Karen. all three have been my partners over the last 12 years. So me and Karen just split. So I literally like a 12-year cycle of relationships from that 2012 meeting moment I've just completed. Maybe I need to call Michelle and say, what else you got for me? But it's obvious, right? I can look at it and see, obviously, I mean, I meet a lot of people. I'm very social. The fact that all three partners, serious partnerships over the last 12 years came from that same person and all her three best friends at that time, like it's wild. And so it's, with twin flame, I think it's a beautiful notion, and the idea of like, because we are all doing that anyway. We're all one, and we've split off into other, pretending to be,
Mhm.
other, when really right now I'm talking to an extension of myself that's such a close vibrational match, so close out
Yes.
of the 8 billion people on the planet that we've actually attracted each other into our worlds, and here we're sharing this moment, right? And those of you listening, you're such a close vibrational match for where this Serena is and I am, and us coming together in this moment. It's that which is like unto itself is drawn, right? Water seeks its own
Mhm.
level. So that's the game that we're just constantly playing. So it makes sense, a twin flame idea of, okay, well, perhaps there's this super, super, if it's all, I think of it like this: if it's all one giant tree, if source is an infinite tree, it stretches in all directions infinitely beyond what our mind can fathom, and yet there
Yes.
will be a branch with two leaves flapping in the winds of eternity right next to each other, right? And so
Mhm.
that's how I think of the idea of like a twin flame or what have you. And the thing that I think personally, I think people need to be careful with is the idea that, like, in any way it would fulfill something out. Like, I think the like um Rumi said, you're not a drop in the ocean is in the drop, right? It's all
Mhm.
within you, all of source is within each drop. So we can be fully, I think the path to, you know to finding any other connection is like becoming completely full within ourselves, and like,
Yes.
like, I am so in love with myself and my life. Or this song that I heard recently is like, if you're looking for the love of your life, stop, they will find you when you're doing what you love. And I just
Mm.
love the statement in that song. And it's like coming whole and full within yourself, and then you come together with this twin flame or this important other aspect of self, and but in your fullness, right? So two fulls coming together to make even more goodness, as opposed to, completing. I need to find them to complete my other half, kind of thing. So that's the one
Yes.
nuance there, which I imagine you would agree with most of that too. And I'm just, but I won't assume. You can tell me I'm wrong if not. So
No, absolutely. And I think you hit on a really important topic as well, which is this idea that if you go far enough up in consciousness or back in consciousness or away in consciousness, you're right, we're all one, right? So everyone on this earth can be your twin flame, right? So then the rub is,
right.
okay, from what perspective does it matter? It only matters from the human perspective, right? And this is something we talk so much about on my
Yeah, right.
YouTube channel, is not getting so caught up in the labels, right? Allowing yourself to deeply intuitively feel, is this relationship serving me? Is it serving my soul? Is it serving my highest evolution? And if not, why am I clinging to it? So really asking yourself those deep questions. And a lot of times we don't ask ourselves those deep questions because we're afraid to know the answer, right? I am like chronically
Yeah.
was a person that would hang on to a relationship for so long because of the potential, right? And because, oh, well, if it just this, if it just that. But as you said, I hadn't filled myself first, right? So I was looking for that potential of myself in somebody else. And it wasn't until I had to get really real with
Yeah.
myself and where I was at and my strengths and my weaknesses that I could even find somebody who was compatible with that. And that takes a
Yeah,
huge it takes a lot of courage to really meet yourself at that level. But when you can meet yourself at that level and you are able to then attract somebody else who can meet you at that level, it's really interesting, Brandon, because you had said something, and I'm not sure if it was in our previous chat or if it's this chat. Um, but you had said something about manifesting and kind of how you're in the process of manifesting the relationship. You're like, oh, I'm one step closer. And I think that's completely true, right? Our relationships are designed
hmm,
to show us what we want, and we can do this with manifesting anything, right? It doesn't necessarily just have to be a twin flame relationship or a soulmate or divine relationship. It can be anything, but knowing, okay, this checked X, Y, Z boxes. What was still left unchecked? And checking in with yourself. Is that something I can
right,
fill within myself? Is that something I'm needlessly expecting somebody else to fill? Or is that something that is a true
right,
desire? Because there's a big difference between I'm expecting somebody else to fill me and no, it's a true soul led desire to have this thing. Right. And so it takes a lot of deep inner
yeah,
work to discern those things. And I think you were really hitting on that by saying, like, okay, I'm one step closer. And it's like, yeah, because you know how great that was. And then okay, maybe I could have
yeah,
shown up differently here, here, and here. And I'm going to do that next time because now I know.
for sure. Yeah, 100%. Every relationship has been closer to it, like the idealized whatever. And I've grown more and become more of who I'm meant to become. And then, you know, like we talked about, I think, you come together, I think we talked about this before too. We talked a while before we started recording, guys. So that's where we're not sure. But I think at some point I talked about this idea that our soul, all it cares about is its growth. It's not attached to it. It doesn't fear losing anyone because it knows I'm stuck with you for eternity, and like I just want to upgrade, and let's come together. For we have soul contracts, I believe, to we have gifts for each other. Once those gifts have been fully exchanged and the lessons and the growth has transpired, a natural separation occurs. And that may be a month, a week, 10 years, a whole lifetime. But we have this idea in our society, a relationship has to last forever to be successful. And I don't believe that has anything to do with what's actually going on. It's more of we come together for that opportunity for growth. Once that's been fully realized, a natural separation occurs. And it's our human that gets attached to the idea of, oh my God, this is
Mm.
familiar. I know this. I don't want to lose you, you know. And your soul is like, no, no, no. I need to grow. And so yeah, I think that's where sometimes it can get sticky with you know with the process, and then when we try and stay in it after its natural expiration date, that's where it's like now you're dealing with like spoiled milk to some degree, and it never tasted sweet.
Yes. Yes. No, it's so true. I think about artists a lot, when you have a really good artist and they're writing from their heartfelt experiences, right? You think about a lot of artists that they're not in, a lot of them are not in long-term relationships, they're in these fast, quick relationships and they're having these big heartbreaks, right? And they're having these major falling in love moments, right? And the best art is inspired from those places. A lot of times when you're in a relationship for a long period of time, it becomes difficult to invite that new energy in. Not saying it's not possible,
Yeah,
but it does become difficult. And that's something that, again, we have to get really real. And this is why, the twin flame notion, can be over romanticized in an unhealthy way. Right? Because then we put all this pressure and expectation on, and we, do the whole pedestal thing where we put somebody else on a pedestal, expecting that this is going to be the thing, right? It's going to be the thing that's going to solve all my problems, make my life amazing. And the reality of the situation is you're responsible for that. We're all responsible for making our lives amazing. And no one single relationship is going to do that. Now, as you said, which is super important, when you have two whole, complete people that are bursting at the seams with energy, and you bring those two people together, what they can create in the world is incredible, especially with the right intention.
Yeah.
And to have two people come together like that, it's wonderful to behold, and that is also art. But it's not necessarily, as you
Hmm.
said, the success of a relationship is what you want to get out of it. So if and I'll reference my karmic relationship for this. What I was looking for, really, when I think about it and get really real with myself, was I was looking for incredible growth. I was looking for my life to be turned upside down. I was looking for understanding how to live a different life away from the 9 to 5, aligned in my spiritual pursuits, being able to be more in my feminine. And I got all of that. I got all of that 110%, but I got all of it with a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And unfortunately, spiritual awakening, that's how it happens. We're usually not going to change, we're not going to awaken if things go right 100% of the time, right? It's in those moments that things are going wrong, or somebody breaks your heart, or somebody ghosts you, that you realize, like, "Oh, I got some stuff to work on." If nobody's triggering you, then you're probably not growing very much.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Your triggers are your treasures. And that's definitely something that my relationships have been very proficient at doing, bringing out, like I said, especially this most recent one really brought out a lot of like, oh, this is where I'm still showing up not fully in integrity or immaturity, not,
Mm.
you know, um, we had an open relationship, and that really requires, you and I talked a little bit about this as well. It's like it really requires a lot of communication and a lot of understanding boundaries and how do you make sure each other feels safe. And yeah, and I can look back and see where I definitely could have done better, and I take that information forward and like, okay, I will do better next time. And so it's uh it's not always a easy process, but it's worth it, I think. I hope.
100%. You're actually hitting on an important point, which is not using that pain that we experience in the loss to make us think that it's not worth trying again. Because we can get to a certain point
Yeah,
where we're like, I just don't know if my heart can take it anymore. Um, and
yeah,
I think that is such an important place to be in, is to realize, like, okay, this pain is going to be with me for a while, right? Especially if it was a long
yeah,
relationship, especially if, you deeply, deeply loved and cared for this person. And a lot of times we will be so afraid of it
yeah,
happening again that we'll stop ourselves from being willing to love, and being willing to put ourselves out there again. And that's, so bringing it back to the twin flame journey, that is literally this one of the sole purposes of your twin flame, is to be this culmination of everything you've ever really wanted in a person. But you have to be willing to put yourself fully 100% on the line, right? Not holding anything back, no masks. You have to be willing to really be vulnerable and take it all off in every moment. And coming from a twin flame that's been in union, the work does not stop there. So when you're in your divine union, as you know, Brandon, the work does not stop there. If anything, it ramps up.
yeah, 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 yeah. You had said something earlier, and I was curious to hear you speak on it more. You had said something about a twin flame, in your idea and vision of how it happens, coming together and then separating, or pushing each other away. And I've heard that sort of thing before. And so I'm just curious, like, is that something you feel like is like a recipe, a part of the recipe that always happens? Like come together, separate, come back together? Is that what you're suggesting?
Mm. That's a really good question. So I have a theory on this. Um, okay, so we have twin flames, right? Let's say just all throughout time, there's been twin flames. As we ascend, there's been more and more twin flames because they wanted to come together to have this experience of uplifting consciousness, right? So a lot of twin flames are going to be
Mhm.
light workers, they're going to be star seeds. And so this process of separation was super, super strong in what I like to call the old paradigm twin flame, which was this idea that, okay, here's again, you kind of have the carrot. You've got this thing dangling in front of you, everything you've ever wanted, but you have to get out of your mind about this person, right? Because in your twin flame, you're going to see reflected all of your own shadows, all of your own wounds, all of your own darkness. And so, this is a lot of times why the separation occurs, is because we are unable to look at ourselves so clearly without running away. So, then there becomes this what's
Yeah.
called a runner chaser dynamic. And this is where the twins will trigger each other, and then one of them will run away and the other one will begin chasing. Now, these are two different expressions of the same thing, which is fear, right? So, while yes, there's this amazing thing being offered to you, which is maybe the opportunity of lifetime, right? Of this beautiful union, this divine union. But what you also have to do is an immense amount of spiritual growth. And looking at yourself that clearly and seeing all of your shadows on the surface of another human is like the recipe for I'm going, I'm splitting, especially to the ego, right? The ego's like, I don't want to look at that. I'm going to stay asleep. I'm not interested. Thank you. Goodbye. But then what ends up happening
Mhm.
generally on this spiritual path, right, through this separation is you begin healing, you begin working through your triggers, you begin going through all of the programs that you've had up until this point about relationships, from childhood till now. And then when you're working through all of those things, you start to realize that, oh, this person was just reflecting back to me all the unhealed things within myself. And so the separation happened a lot with like the old paradigm twin flames. My separation was 6 months, which a lot of twin flames will tell me on my YouTube channel is very quick. Um, to me, it felt like forever. I'm sure anybody would say the same thing. But I believe as we continue to ascend, we continue to have new waves of twin flames coming in. We're holding down light patterns, we're holding down the grids, we're ascending to 5D, that the separations are going to get quicker and quicker and quicker because we're going to
Mm.
already have worked through those karmic baggages.
Mm.
Whereas now we don't really get as triggered when we come together with our twin flame. And in fact, I believe at least maybe Gen Z and maybe Gen Alpha, those that came in, the souls that came in to have the twin flame experience may not have separation at all. They may be able to just go straight into their conscious creatorhood and, start doing what they need to do, start doing their missions on the work, because those of us that have come before, just like you, just like anybody else, have done the work. So as soon as you heal that within you, right, you would heal that for your entire family line, previous and
Yeah.
before, or and future. So I'm very interested to see as my daughter grows up what that is going to look like for her, because I would love to see her just start stepping into conscious creatorhood. I'm sure she's going to school me on everything I'm already working
Yeah.
on. I can only imagine.
Of course.
But I'm really excited to see as this new generation comes through, like what that is going to look like, how amazing and tapped in they're going to be. And I know you have a son as well,
Yeah.
correct? And I can only imagine what
Yeah.
your son is like because of the father that you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's given him quite a leg up, and being raised his whole life as, thinking in these terms, and, it's definitely really empowered him. And he's definitely, it's funny because our dynamic is I'm such a like eternal child, and he's such like the old man energy more. It's kind of like I'm pretty sure he's been dad a lot more than I have. He's just he's so mature and wise, and like I'm like, come on, we're throwing a party, and he's like, oh, I think I'll read a book or study film or what, whatever. So it's interesting to the dynamic is definitely a fun and interesting one. So so just to be clear, so your current partnership, you guys came together a few years back, you split for 6 months,
Hmm.
and then you reunited. Wow. Were you
Yes.
in touch during those 6 months, or was it like a full separation kind of?
That's a really good
Just
question.
out of curiosity.
So we were so this goes into some more kind of twin flame ideals. But essentially, when you're in separation, a lot of times you will have periods of what they call no contact, which is what you're asking. Like, were we in contact or were we not?
Yes.
And so this can happen one of two ways. It can be due to one or the twins, or it can be due to the universe. So my twin and I, we were only in no contact for various periods of time because he was in a very remote area in South Africa, and I had gone back to the United States to mend and heal myself from my karmic relationship. Um, and
Hmm.
so, because of certain things that were going on with either one of us, like if I didn't have Wi-Fi or if his power shut down, so they would lose power. They had a lot of storms where he was, so there was various things that would happen with like our technology that caused us to be in no contact. But for a lot of twins, another sign of being a twin, is that having that no contact, but due to triggering. So, my twin will ghost me, or my twin will block me, or things like that. But it's actually interesting, Brandon, because it's in those periods of no contact that the signs and synchronicity and like the guidance from the universe will ramp up like 100%. So you'll be having no contact with
Hmm.
this person, yet you'll hear every song you ever associated with them, or you'll see all the signs, or you'll constantly get the angel numbers. All of these different things will happen during this time, and it's one of those things that you just keep getting pulled back into the journey again and again and again. And this is why it's really an awakening and an
Hmm.
ego death journey, is because the ego wouldn't choose this. The ego just wants to live. But this journey of
Yeah.
unconditional love really is kind of death to the ego in a way. So me and my
Yeah.
twin, yeah, we were in separation, a world apart, and about 8-9 hours time difference. But we were in contact most of the time. It was only, maybe a week
Okay, so it
here,
wasn't like
2
a
weeks there.
breakup.
No,
So it wasn't like a breakup separation. It was just
no,
a physical separation. I see.
exactly. But it can be
Got it.
either. So some twins will be so
Yeah.
triggered that it will be like a breakup, and some will be, like I think we had worked through so much of our baggage before we had met that it allowed us to kind of sail a little bit smoother. That's not to say we didn't have major triggering and things like that. Me wanting to be a little bit more of a free spirit, and him, we talked about open relationships, him definitely wanting to be more
Yep.
monogamous. We both had wounds
Hmm.
around that, especially with infidelity on both sides. So, it was one of those things that really is like looking in a mirror. And that's what they say with the twin flame journey, is that you really come face to face with your own reflection in a lot of times a painful way.
Yeah. 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 I hear that for sure. And yeah, it's interesting the runner idea because I really I heard this years ago and it stuck with me, and it was referring to like the different, it was an article or something. This is many years back. We're,
Mm.
we're kind of explaining from the writer's perspective the difference between twin flame and karmic and soulmate, and I remember it saying, I think it was for soulmate. It was like it talked about this runner chaser thing, and it put it in an interesting way. And this is how I feel about that first partnership. I told you it's been the trifecta since July 28th, 2012, the very first one. Um, a lot of people looked at that relationship for me and were like, Brandon, like, this is such not a fit. Like, she's insecure, she's immature, she's, you know, and yet I had such deep like affection and love for her. And then when we did split, um, it was very much like that, where I then missed her more than I ever had missed a previous partner. And I went pretty
Wow.
quickly into number two, like a month or so later. But I then was like pining for her just in my life, or to hear her
Wow.
voice or to talk to her. And she was running hard, 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 and would not. I mean, for years I tried to like just have a friendship. And then from one perspective, it's kind of like it did. People were puzzled by it a little bit, the relationship. And then I heard this or read this article, and it was like, yeah, a lot of times these soulmates, I think is how put it, would come in certain lifetimes where they're very deeply connected. And obviously she's the one who's boyfriend committed suicide on my birthday with the
Mhm.
same name of the town all my relatives are from with that birthday. So obviously deeply connected. And and but they'll come the idea was that you come together in a certain lifetime where one soulmate has outpaced the growth of another
Mm,
at that point in their soul's evolution. So there's all this energy felt around these two people, but in this lifetime, it's not quite even and caught up. And so it's
yeah.
kind of like it doesn't make a lot of sense. Although in my case, it's like people are like, why are you so like fixated on reconnecting in any way with this person? And so I thought that to me felt true and resonated like, oh, okay, we
Mhm.
probably have a lot of future or a lot of past, and of course they're the same. It's just really all parallel at the end of the day, since time is an illusion, but that's another conversation. But I think that for me, that idea really resonated, that, oh, okay, this explains why I have this incredible amount of draw and attraction, because I'm feeling the potential of who our souls are to each other, and not necessarily is this lifetime going to be the highest expression of that connection.
Right,
So I'm curious your
right.
thoughts on that idea.
Exactly. No, and I think to further that, I agree 100%. I think to further that, um, you think about the humans that cause us pain in this lifetime are often the souls that we are closest to, on the other side,
That's
because
exactly
those are
right.
the souls that we
Exactly
are
right.
so close to that would volunteer their love so much in order to give us the
Yep.
experience of feeling unloved, of feeling not enough, of feeling any type of pain.
Yep.
So I agree
100%.
100% in the intricacies of how this universe works, the layers that there are, like you're saying, of, maybe in this lifetime, this soul was more advanced, and in this lifetime, you kind of are playing catch up. And, there are so many, woven things happening in our reality in just this one human lifetime, not to mention, infinite different realities and expressions of that lifetime. Like, it
Yeah.
just goes on and on and
It's a
on.
lot.
And this is why, as you're saying, like
Yep.
with the twin flame thing, to to understand it is really just to say, like, okay, that's a label that we can use to describe this connection, right? But what is it
Hmm.
fulfilling in me now in this moment, right? And not getting so lost in all this other stuff, because all of that is just to better help our human brain understand, right? Like, our human brain needs our hand to be held a little bit sometimes. And when we can get that understanding and we get that resonance in the heart, and we feel, oh yeah, that's what this situation was. It's like, okay, now I can understand my situation, and I can move on and keep going on with my evolution, because I understand the way that this person was supposed to fill a role in my life. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Fully agree. Yeah. And I think you touched on something important. It's like, the labels are just us like kind of reaching to try and describe something that's really beyond of our comprehension in a certain way. And because at the end of the day, it is all, like you said, it's all a twin flame. I mean, everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. So it's just like
Yes.
degrees of separation. Like, okay, well, this one happens to be the leaf right next to me on the tree. That one's a branch over. That one's at the end of the same. But it's, and you also touched on something that, I fully agree with. Uh, I remember hearing for the first time Dr. Eben Alexander, who I had on the show, who wrote Proof of Heaven, and big best-selling book of his near-death experience. The Harvard neurosurgeon whose brain was fried, and then he came back miraculously. And that's one of the things he talked about, is like, hey, oftentimes those that the villains in your story, are the people that challenge you the most, are your ones you're closest to, you know,
Mhm.
on the other side, and that's that's powerful. It's powerful to realize that, like, and I think it's healing to think, oh, this person that did something to me to hurt me so deeply was actually, you know, there's maybe even suffering in order to be able to do the thing, that
Yes.
caused you the pain. As a, you realize at the end of the day, it's all gifts, and that's not to bypass the pain of it or to diminish the pain of it, but I think that's where we end up. And knowing that that's where we're going to end up, I think is a great, you know, guiding light to kind of like look to when it's feeling dark. Sort of the
Yes.
light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to,
100%.
you know, we're almost to an hour here. That has gone really fast. I'd love, as we sort of wind down here, if you could share. I'd love to hear any story of synchronicity, serendipity, positive paranormal story, anything fun that you have up your sleeve to share.
Yes. So I have one short one, which actually connects to something you shared earlier, and then another personal one.
Oh,
So you had
cool.
talked about the tree. Um, and the
Hmm.
tree, having all of these roots and all of these branches, and you just so happen to have the leaf next to you. So interestingly enough, when I met my twin flame, I did not, so I was also in an open relationship at this time. And I was
Hmm.
traveling with my partner that I was in an open relationship with. And so I did not make a move on my twin flame. I just had found him very attractive and really wanted to get to know him, but I ended up not pursuing him. And so we left where I had met him and continued traveling. And I was so sad that I didn't do anything, that I was like, okay, let me sit in the car, let me do a little meditation with myself, let me let spirit guide me so that I can kind of put this to rest
Hmm.
and I can be done with it, right? And so I'm sitting there in a
Yeah.
meditation and I have this tree come up in my vision. And
Oh,
so
wow.
as I'm like,
Wow.
let me take him as a part of me so that I can no longer feel um like he's not a part of me in a way, you know? And so what I realized as I was,
Oh.
kind of growing this tree and these branches is that he was the whole other side of the tree. And this tree had like come together
Mm.
and it was already one. And so that's when I realized, oh, this
Wow.
is a different kind of relationship that I'm maybe not, understanding the full complexities that are at play here. So even as we sit behind you and there's this beautiful visionary tree behind you, which
Tree.
is so
Yeah.
also interesting because this is exactly what I want to like paint on my daughter's wall in her room. So just lots of tree
Wow.
synchronicity there.
Wow.
um,
Wow. Yeah.
and
My
then my
son
own
painted this.
oh really
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
stunning.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
And
cut you off. You can continue
no,
what you're saying.
no, it's all good.
We have a little
My
lag,
other
guys, so sometimes it might seem like that.
yes. My other synchronicity is so again, twin flames generally have this kind of 1111 numerology code that's kind of active in the twin flame community. And so for me, when I had made the decision to pursue my twin flame relationship, I was traveling throughout Africa with my other partner. I decided to leave this partner and go my own way. And it was on January 1st. It was turning into a number one personal year for me, and I had spent
Wow.
111 days exactly on the continent of Africa when I got on the plane to fly home. So it was like all
Wow.
of these crazy 11s and ones and new beginnings and new cycles and karmic ties ending and all that kind of stuff. So, pay attention to that kind of stuff. Look at the license plates as they are driving by, and you have access to all of this. That's the thing, right? Is you can ask spirit, give me a sign, show me that I'm on the right path. And you can create your language with the
Yeah.
universe, which is something I help a lot of people through when they're on a journey like this, is because when you're connected and tuned into spirit, you feel so much more confident making the decisions that you need to make and going in directions that scare you when you've got that backup from spirit. So that's my
Mm.
go-to.
Yeah. And didn't you say your daughter is birthday is 11/11?
Yes. Yes, also born on
Yeah. Yeah.
11/11. Yes.
So I'll just add that to your little pile there because then you ended up bringing a child into the world on 11/11. Wow. Well, very, very
Yeah.
cool. This
Yeah.
has been awesome, Serena. I'm glad I came close to not doing this podcast because I was like, do I really want to talk about relationship now? Am I ready? And I'm glad that I did. It has been, yeah, beautiful to share and connect with you. And I know listeners will want to connect you with you and follow your YouTube or whatever. Can you just share the best way to do that?
Yes, 100%. So if you guys want to follow along, primarily we make YouTube videos. So we are Serena and James Life After Union. We actually are running a group coaching also beginning the week of November 11th. Um, and we're looking actually for beta testers for this group coaching. So if your listeners are interested and want a beta test for us, there is a link that you can find in every single one of my YouTube videos where you can apply to be a beta tester with a group of other twin flames who are also going through the same spiritual awakening journey. So we're super excited about that. Again, it's beginning November 11th. So applications before October 27th. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to connecting with you guys and yeah, just sharing the healing journey with as many people as I can.
Well, that is a very noble cause, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing, and I know the listeners do as well. You are a beautiful reflection. And I do have one final question for you. It is my cliche closing question. It is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Serena Willis?
Mm. I would say just find your thing and live that. You know, don't get too bent out of shape about needing it to be a certain way. Just be here and live it. Whatever comes your way, allow it to come and make that part of yourself and part of your story and part of your journey.
Mm, I love that. And know that it does exist. The thing that no one is more
Mm,
perfectly designed to bring to the world. It, you know, there's enough room for us all, and I think that's
yes.
so important for everyone, myself, everyone, to remember, like, it's you are worthy as any other being ever has been, could be, or will be, because it's all you.
Yes,
So
100%.
with
Your
that being
dreams are
said,
dreaming you.
yes, I love that. Well, thank you, Serena. You are so lovely. And thank all of you for tuning in your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts into another episode. Until next time, journey well.
I love you so, 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 so much.